Hey y'all, so today I just wanted to do a very quick video introducing a new series on my channel. So if you've been watching my videos for any extended length of time, you may be aware that there is a fairly fluid list of books where I will often say, oh, I really want to get to this book very soon, and I really need to get to this book very soon. And with these books, I've been saying that for, in some cases, 3 years, and it still hasn't happened. And I noticed a pretty common theme among this list of books. See, there are many books that come and go from this list, sometimes getting forgotten, sometimes getting read, but the ones that stick around for these 2 to 3 years are often popular YA series. In pretty much all of these cases, I do legitimately really want to read these series, but for some reason, years have passed and I still haven't. And in this series, I'm finally going to be reading some of those books, or at least attempting to read them. And before I get into what books I'm going to be reading or the logistics of it, I kind of wanted to briefly touch on why I tend to continually put off these really popular book series despite the fact that I really want to read them. So let's backtrack to the end of 2013. At the end of 2013 was when I first discovered BookTube, started watching BookTube, and started reading pretty avidly again. I'd taken a 3 or 4 year break from reading pretty avidly while I was in college and the last couple of years of high school. But at the end of 2013, when I discovered BookTube, I went ahead full force into the world of BookTube, reading a ton of the popular books that everyone was recommending and starting to collect this massive collection of books that I have behind me. And I've realized since then that a lot of those series that were really, really popular in that time that I did end up reading are ones that I really didn't enjoy or was really underwhelmed by. For example, let's look back at early 2014 BookTube and think about what books were super popular on BookTube. A bit of a controversial one, but The Hunger Games. This one is still very popular, but it was definitely talked about more in this earlier era of BookTube. And this is definitely the trilogy that I'm going to talk about that I have the highest opinion on. I really like this first book. I really like Catching Fire. Mockingjay, But overall, I wasn't as impressed with this trilogy as I expected to be, and there are many, many other series that I love more than this one. I mean, spoiler alert, this isn't even on my list of my favorite series that I posted a few months back. It's a fine trilogy, but it's not one that I ever really fell in love with. Another really popular trilogy at the time was the Divergent trilogy. This was one of the first trilogies that I jumped into when I started reading books recommended by BookTube, and I loved this first book. But from there, it was pretty messy. I thought Insurgent was okay, and I really didn't like Insurgent, so once again, another super popular BookTube trilogy that got pushed aside. Another one that was talked about a ton in 2014 and late 2013 was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. This was another of the early ones that I picked up, and I have been pretty underwhelmed by this series in general. I still haven't read the third book, but overall, I thought the first two were just alright, nothing too special. And then we move on to the worst offender on this list, which is Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. I read this again at the very early end of 2014, and oh boy, did I just like this trilogy. I was kind of a little bit nicer to it at the moment, but when I look back, no. This is one of my least favorite books that I've ever read because of BookTube. I think I've forgotten about it so much and pushed it to the recesses of my mind because I didn't even mention it in my least favorite in the hyped BookTube books in that tag that I did last year. This series, it got better as it went along, but not by much. I just did not like this trilogy at all. And then there are some other trilogies or series that were really, really popular in that era of BookTube that I've since read and not really enjoyed very much, aka the first book in the Chaos Walking trilogy by Patrick Ness. I didn't hate this, but I was pretty underwhelmed and have yet to continue the series. And then of course there is the Selection series by Kira Cass, which I've again only read the first 2 books of, but that's mostly because I thought that the only merit it had was to make fun of it for how sexist and bad it is. And that's not to say that all of the series that were popular on BookTube during that time were bad. I'm just saying that a lot of the ones that I picked up during that time I was super disappointed by, and so I've kind of been burned by a lot of the really, really popular YA series that I have read because BookTube recommended them. And of course there are also some success stories from this time period. I mean, I really love The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer, and this was one of the really popular YA booktube series that I actually did like. There's also the Infernal Devices series, which I count a little bit less because I did love The Mortal Instruments before I started watching booktube, but this was definitely a series that was very hyped when I first started watching booktube, and I absolutely love it. So long story short, in the past I've been burned by a lot of the really popular YA series that have been talked about over and over again on booktube, and I guess subconsciously I tend to shy away from some of those series now, even when I am really interested in reading them. So now, after that long spiel about how many times I've been burned by YA series, let's talk about the ones that I plan to read and how I plan to go about doing this series. So essentially, I have a list of, I think, 4 or 5 series that are super popular on booktube. A lot of people have opinions on them. Sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive, but these series get talked about a lot on booktube. Since I've got a selection of series, I'm going to be just reading the first books of the series for this. And I already have all of these first books, so it's not like I'm asking for suggestions of really popular YA books or like I am going out and buying new books. No, these are books that I have on my shelves that I've just been subconsciously avoiding for quite a while in some cases. So as of right now, my plan with these books is to read the first book in each of these series and to kind of film an as I'm reading style discussion about the book. I've done this in the past for my selection hate reading video, and I did it like as one of my first booktube videos forever ago when I was reading The Bone Season. That one's a little messy, but the hate reading the selection one is pretty fun. So rather than doing a review on each of these books when there are like 3 or 4 other books in the series that I also will eventually need to do reviews on, I kind of want to just, as I'm reading, film updates, talk about how I feel about the book, and then at the end of the video do just like a mini discussion, semi-review on how I felt about the book. And I really want to do these more like as I'm reading style videos for these discussions because it allows me to have a less structured format to the video and to like talk more casually about my thoughts and feelings as I'm going along versus at the end when I'm going to be like, this is how good the plot was, this is how good the character development was, etc, etc. So without any further ado, let's jump into the book series that I'm going to be reading the first books of for this video series. I'm going to be starting with the first one that I intend on reading, and that is 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I read the first chapter of this as part of my Try a Chapter tag back in September, and I enjoyed the first chapter that I read. This is one of the books on the list that I have always been the most intrigued by, and I think the only thing that has really held me back from reading it is because it is so popular. I honestly don't think I've ever heard a bad review of this book, which is obviously a good thing, but I'm always worried that I will be that one person that didn't enjoy it as much as everyone else, and so I guess will see if I am that person. So after 6 of Crows, I don't really have any specific order that I'm planning on reading these, so I'm just going to show them to you in a random order. The next one is Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This was one that intrigued me long before it was actually released because I believe that Kaz from Little Book Owl had an arc like 8 months before it came out, and when she talked about how it had unique formatting, I was really curious and really wanted to pick it up. So when it finally did come out, I picked it up and I never got around to it, despite the fact that a ton of people really loved it. However, at this point, my main hesitation with this book has actually been that I started trying to read this book about a year or so ago. I picked it up and went to read maybe like the first 10 or 20 pages, and I didn't like the main character's voice, which is weird, I know, given that it's told in like case files, but there are like interviews at the very beginning with one of the main characters, and she just talked like a typical high school girl. It sounded very stereotypical high school and very like drama filled, and I'm sure that the rest of the book gets into not like petty teen drama, but that's how it initially came off in my like first 10 pages of reading it. So I was kind of like not turned off from reading it altogether, but I was like, I really don't want to read this right now, and I put it down. But the unique formatting and all of the praise that it's gotten has definitely made me still curious to pick it up, and I'm going to for this series. Next up is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, another one that I have actually started. I got 90 pages into this in the Booktubeathon in 2015 and put it down because it was a little bit too long for the Booktubeathon. I liked the 90 pages that I read, but I think that the Booktubeathon was a really bad time to start reading this because I rushed those 90 pages and I feel like I didn't do them justice. So that's what I'm going to do in this series. I'm going to do this book justice and try to read it at a normal pace rather than reading as rapidly as possible. Next up is Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes, one of the most divisive on this list, I think. I've seen people say, oh, this is so much better than Throne of Glass. Don't bother with Throne of Glass, just read Falling Kingdoms, it's a lot better. But I've also seen a lot of people be like, Falling Kingdoms writing is not very good. So I feel like I have seen very mixed reviews on this series, and I personally think that I would probably prefer this to Throne of Glass, but obviously I haven't read either series, so I don't know. That being said, I'm going into this book pretty optimistic. I'm really curious about this series, and I'm really hoping to enjoy it. And the last book series on this list is the one that I've been saying I'm going to get to for the longest amount of time. It's been at least 3 years, possibly more. That is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I've said so many times on this channel, oh, I'm gonna get to Throne of Glass. I'm finally gonna get to Throne of Glass. This time, I'm gonna try to actually get to it. This, my friends, is what I believe to be the most popular series on BookTube, except like Harry Potter. Anytime I see any poll on Goodreads that's asking about what should I read, if Throne of Glass is in the options, unless it's up against Harry Potter, Throne of Glass is gonna win. Like, there are so many people that love this series. I see it all over the place. There are so many Throne of Glass stans. And that's kind of why I'm worried about liking it. Because I've seen some pretty negative reviews of the series from reviewers that I trust. And that makes me worry if I will enjoy it. But that being said, there are also reviewers that I trust who really love this series, but even they say that some of the later books are a little bit messy. Either way, I'm finally going to be giving it a try because I've had this book on my TBR shelf on Goodreads for at least 3 years, and I've had this book on my shelves for over a year, and I just need to get to it. I need to get to the series. I've been saying that forever. So those are the popular YA series that I am going to be reading for this new series on my channel. I just realized that I don't have a name for this series, so I'm not going to try to come up with one on the spot, but maybe there's one in the title. I don't know. Like I said, for this specific series on my channel, I'm going to be reading the first book in these book series. I definitely will plan to read more books in the series if I do like the first book, but for this series, I'm just going to be reading the first book. So if I do read the first Throne of Glass book and I really love it, don't expect me to jump into Crown of Midnight right afterward. I'm going to be reading these 5 books before I read anything else, or at least I'm going to be trying to. I might put some comics in there, I don't know. But I'm definitely going to be getting to these 5 books before I get into later installments in any of these series. So that is all that I had for this video today. I think it went a little bit longer than I intended it to. Oh well. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching.